It would be an understatement to say that it is difficult to follow up from the climactic end of the Fate Karakura Town arc, but the story arc that we're discussing in this video finds itself in this position. The Fullbring arc is one of the most controversial and disliked portions of the Bleach story, but why is this the case? The Fullbring arc is a response to the commonly cited criticisms of Bleach as a story, which is that Ichigo has no goal or drive within the story. The entirety of the Fullbring arc is centered around Ichigo being driven to get his powers back. We see him go through several phases mentally during this arc, where he denies the significance of his prior shinigami powers and his bond that he has formed with everybody in the Soul Society, as at the start of the arc he is very dismissive towards it, trying not to think about everything that he has lost with his powers. But when he comes to accept his powerlessness, he resolves to regain his powers, and he does so through seeking the help of Ginjo Kugo, the leader of a newly introduced group of characters called the Fullbringers. In addition to this, we see Ichigo betrayed as he sinks into despair, and how by the end of the Fullbring arc he overcomes his despair and even understands his enemy Ginjo Kugo and shows respect towards him by actively going to the Soul Society and asking for his body to be returned to the world of the living where he can be properly buried. Now think of this video as my defense of the Fullbring arc and why I believe it to be one of the most significant story portions within the entirety of the Bleach story. In my opinion, I believe it to be a very misunderstood story arc, so in this video I want to explain my perspective so that there's a solid argument against anybody who criticizes the Fullbring arc and even go so far as to call it canon filler. So without further delay, let's begin my analysis of the Fullbring arc, or the Lost Agent arc. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. The anime adaptation of the Fullbring arc had begun in October of 2011 and had ran all the way up until March 2012. It takes place between episodes 343 to 366, running for a total of 23 canon episodes, with one filler episode being episode 355. It adapts chapters 424 to 479, which ends up being 56 chapters adapted into 23 episodes. This arc is set 17 months after the defeat of Aizen, and it follows Ichigo's life after he has lost his powers, as we follow him struggle to regain them. This arc brings us back to the start of the story, where Ichigo had stated that he had wanted to be a normal high school student, one who didn't have the ability to see ghosts, because it was all too often getting in the way of his day-to-day life. So now that he is exactly what he had wished for, how does he deal with this? Ichigo's well-defined desire to protect is in opposition to this desire to be normal, as he becomes conflicted that he cannot do anything to help his friends anymore, as it becomes apparent within the Fullbring arc that someone or something is targeting Ichigo's friends and family, and he cannot remain powerless and do nothing about it. Now in comparison to the Fate Karakura Town arc, the stakes here have been considerably lowered. Now at the time of publication, nobody really knew where the Fullbring arc was headed. With Aizen no longer in the picture, and with the climactic finale, a lot of people had felt that the Bleach story had wrapped up everything that it needed to tell. But if you pay attention to Kubo's writing, then you know that this isn't the case, and that Kubo would not end his story with Ichigo being powerless. The Fullbring arc is a reboot of the Bleach story, and frankly, after the defeat of Aizen, a new chapter has to start. And for that to be done in a considerable way, Ichigo needed to have lost his powers, so that he returns to the state that he was in at the start of the story. Ichigo couldn't protect his friends and family against the hollow Fishbone D until Rukia had shared her powers with him, and similarly Ichigo is unable to protect his friends and family from the threat of Tsukishima unless he struggles to regain his powers in the form of his Fullbring. Now during those 17 months where Ichigo was powerless, it's made clear that Ichigo still fought to protect those who were weak, whether if this was protecting a student who was being bullied, or when he deals with a thief who had stolen Ginjo's bag right at the start of the Fullbring arc. Prior to helping Ginjo, he does say to himself that despite the fact that he has lost his powers, he had still retained some of the physical strength and reflexes that he had developed as a shinigami. So it's clear that despite him not having supernatural powers, he does everything in his ability as a normal person to assist those around him. But when the threat to his friends and family becomes far too great for a normal person to deal with, it is at this moment that he truly feels the loss of his powers, and he actively seeks to regain them. Now this is important because the Fullbring arc is a precursor to the 1000-Year Blood War arc. Kubo wanted to reboot and recreate everything that he had done within Bleach up until now, hence why there is a time skip, there's a return to the familiar setting of the first story arc, and like I mentioned before, there's one glaring similarity, which is Ichigo's powerlessness. I can appreciate that there's a lot of disdain for the Fullbring arc because most of the people who had experienced it did so through the anime. Now, while it adapts 56 chapters into 23 episodes, a lot of people felt like it dragged on, and this is because the anime adaptation of the Fullbring arc had needless padding. They had done so through introducing several filler scenes that weren't within the manga, and it is because of this a lot of people feel like the Fullbring arc just dragged on and never really got to the point. So if your only experience of the Fullbring arc is through the anime, then I definitely urge you to check out the manga version. I do believe that it will help you to see this story arc in a new light. So let's go through the events of the Fullbring arc as I explain to you why this story arc grounds Ichigo as a character and sends him on this journey of self-discovery. At the start of the arc, we see Ichigo continuing his life as a student. It is also revealed that he has taken up a part-time job after school. Very quickly, we are introduced to the character of Ginjo Kugo, who is persistent on getting the attention of Ichigo. He does so by telling him to be careful of those around him, as Ginjo questions the motives of Urahara and tells Ichigo that he knows very little about his own family. When he calls into question Ichigo's father, he then hands to Ichigo an invitation into his exclusive group called Execution. Ichigo is pushed to the point of frustration where he has no choice but to contact Execution after he learns that somebody is targeting his friends and family. The final straw that prompts Ichigo to take action is after Uryu is cut down by an unknown assailant, who we eventually learn is an individual called Tsukishima. Everybody around Ichigo is trying to protect him. They don't want him to get involved, so they conceal what is happening. They are aware that he has done so much to protect them over time, and they feel like it is now their turn to repay their debt to him. But it's fairly easy to misunderstand these intentions and feel like you're being left out. And this is exactly how Ichigo feels. When he is overwhelmed by his feelings of powerlessness, he turns to Ginjo Kugo and his group Execution. It is here that he learns about the abilities of Fullbringers, and he also finds out that Chad is a member of Execution and is a Fullbringer himself. After Orihime is targeted by Tsukishima, Ginjo reveals to Ichigo that Tsukishima was the former leader of the Fullbringers. And in terms of Ichigo regaining his powers, he undergoes several different rounds of training in order to activate his own Fullbring abilities. The first of which is with Riruka, the second with the Fullbringer Jackie, and the third and final round of his training takes place when he faces off against Ginjo with the help of Yukio's Fullbring. After he completes his Fullbring training and awakens his abilities, he realizes that Tsukishima has manipulated the memories of all of his friends and family through using his own Fullbring ability Book of the End. He had planted false memories into their minds, leading them to believe that Tsukishima is a trusted ally who has been fighting alongside them from the very beginning. Ichigo faces off against Tsukishima while Ginjo takes on the members of Execution who are being manipulated by him. But when a recovered Uryu arrives on the battlefield, he has a shocking revelation for Ichigo, as he reveals that it wasn't Tsukishima who had cut him down. In actual fact, he was attacked by Ginjo. After this revelation, Ginjo cuts down Ichigo, as we find out his true intentions, which were to steal Ichigo's Fullbring powers. At this point, when Ichigo has gone through so much struggle in order to regain his abilities, they are taken away from him again. His frustration leads him to sink into despair as he pleads with Ginjo to return his powers back to him. But when Ichigo is impaled through the chest by a glowing sword, he turns around to see Rukia standing behind him, as in another shocking turn of events, he has his Shinigami powers returned to him, as it is revealed that Rukia, along with the help of Urahara, had several members of the Gotei 13 place their Ryatsu into the sword, as the Soul Society felt indebted to Ichigo for defeating Aizen, and they had repaid their debt to him by creating this Reishi sword, which was ultimately used by Ichigo to regain his powers. After Rukia explains to Ichigo how his powers were returned to him, a gate opens as we see Kinpachi, Hitsugaya, Renji, Ikaku and Byakuya arrive to assist Ichigo in his battle against Ginjo and the Fullbringers. After their arrival, we quickly learn that the very first substitute Shinigami before Ichigo was Ginjo Kugo, and we find out why he holds a grudge against the Soul Society, when he tells Ichigo that the substitute Shinigami badge is a surveillance device used by the Soul Society, and that the two of them were tricked by Ukitake. And in addition to this, the substitute Shinigami badge also suppresses the power of an individual. He tries to bring Ichigo over onto his side. He wants him to hate the Soul Society just as much as he does, but for Ichigo this is impossible, because if it wasn't for the Soul Society, he wouldn't have his powers back now, and he believes that there must have been a good reason for the Soul Society to use the substitute Shinigami badge as a surveillance device. In the end, Ichigo has complete trust within the Soul Society, and he sees no reason to turn against them. Each of the Fullbringers become powered up when Ginjo shares Ichigo's Fullbring with them, but they still appear to be no match against the members members of the Gotei 13, as Kinpachi defeats Giriko, Hitsugaya takes out Yukio, Renji defeats Jackie, Ikaku beats Mo, and lastly Byakuya takes out Tsukishima. After Ichigo and Ginjo activate their respective Bankais, the final phase of their battle begins. They clash several times as Ichigo proves to be more powerful than his opponent. After he delivers the final blow and cuts down Ginjo, the leader of the Fullbringers ends up dying, as aside from Ukiura, who Ichigo had killed while he was in his Vasto Lorde form, this is the first person that Ichigo has killed with his own hands while being fully conscious. Tsukishima also ends up dying, and the Fullbring arc concludes with Ichigo going to the Soul Society and requesting for Ginjo's body to be returned to the human world so that he can be buried properly. During this story arc, the only proof that Ichigo has that he was once a Shinigami is his substitute Shinigami badge. Even before Rukia had given her powers to him, he had the ability to see spirits, but not once did he feel superior to others because of this, and he had never wanted to use his ability to see spirits to help others in any way. Ichigo simply desired to live a normal life, and he gets what he wants during the Fullbring arc. After losing his Shinigami powers, he has 17 months of powerlessness. In that time, he wasn't visited by Rukia, and he had come to accept his current situation. Ichigo clearly states at the start of the story arc that he is indifferent towards the Soul Society, and that he doesn't miss Rukia, despite the fact that he has dreams of the Soul Society and the members of the Gotei 13. Although he may not be a part of that world anymore, it has left too much of an impact on him for his subconscious mind to just discard away. On the surface, he may appear as though he doesn't care, but deep down he really is grieving the loss of his powers. At the start of the Fullbring arc, he may not even know this, but he certainly becomes apparent of it when Tsukishima targets his friends and family. During his Fullbring training, he admits to himself that there wasn't a time that he wasn't proud of his Shinigami powers. The abilities of Fullbring allow you to draw out the soul of an object and to enhance or amplify that object with your own soul. Ichigo's own Fullbring is activated through his substitute Shinigami badge, and like I had mentioned earlier, this is the only object that remains from his time as a Shinigami. It has all of the memories of Ichigo's battles, his feelings every time that he had donned his Shinigami Shihakusho and protected his loved ones. During their training, it is Chad who tells Ichigo that he knows that Ichigo wants to protect others, and because of his powerlessness, he is aware that this is hurting him, and this is exactly what his friends and family can sense from Ichigo. They know that he is lying to himself, and to prevent him from dwelling on his feelings of powerlessness, they refuse to get him involved with anything that would remind him of his powerlessness. Hence why Uryu was adamant not to tell Ichigo what had happened after he was cut down by Tsukishima. Ryuken also advises Orihime not to get Ichigo involved because he has no power to do anything about it. Now there is a Bleach light novel that takes place within the 17 months between the fake Karakura Town arc and the Fullbring arc. This light novel is called Death Save the Strawberry, Death referring to Rukia and Strawberry referring to Ichigo. This light novel centers around Rukia attempting to get Ichigo's powers back. In addition to this, we get to see how Ichigo spent those 17 months while he was powerless, as we learn that he had continued trying to help and protect others. So with everything that I have said up until now, why do people still refer to the Fullbring arc as canonical filler? In my opinion, the Fullbring arc is a necessary part of the Bleach story. The 56 chapters of the Fullbring arc reveal so much about the world of Bleach, including a much needed explanation as to the origins of both Orihime and Chad's powers, as we find out that the abilities that they have been using since the start of the story are Fullbring abilities. Orihime utilizes her Fullbring through the hair clips that her brother had given to her, and Chad activates his Fullbring through his skin color, as he feels proud of his Mexican heritage. In addition to this, we learn about the origins of the position of a substitute Shinigami through Ginjo Kugo, who was Ichigo's predecessor. Through Ginjo's character, we see a different side to Ichigo. The knowledge that Ginjo learns that ends up turning him against the Soul Society does not affect Ichigo in the slightest, and this is a sign of his maturity. We compare the former substitute Shinigami to the one who is currently holding the position, and even moments before Ginjo's death, he wonders whether if Ichigo was the first substitute Shinigami, would he have repeated in his footsteps, or would he have continued to trust the Soul Society? Despite the differences that both Ichigo and Ginjo have, Ichigo still has enough respect for Ginjo to want to give him a proper burial, and it is this respect and maturity that Ichigo shows here that ultimately leads to Ginjo wanting to help Ichigo at the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, when he orders Tsukishima to assist Ichigo by restoring his Zanpakuto that was destroyed by Yhwach. In addition to this, another character from the Fullbring arc who plays a pivotal role within the 1000-Year Blood War arc is Yukio, as he uses his abilities to help Ichigo and the others travel from the Soul Society to the Soul King's palace in their final confrontation with Yhwach. People complain that as a character Ichigo has no direction, but when a story arc comes along that serves to give him a clear sense of direction, they don't like it. When Kubo actually gives a critic critics what they want, they fail to appreciate it, and what ends up happening is that they double down on their takes, and refer to an excellent character-driven story arc like the Fullbring arc as a filler arc, one that would have no consequence on Bleach as a whole if it didn't exist. Prior to this story arc, Ichigo could only utilize his hollow abilities through activating a hollow mask, but thanks to the Fullbring arc, Ichigo was able to manifest these hollow-like abilities through his Fullbring, and so when his shinigami powers had returned to him, they had merged with the small fraction of his Fullbring powers that had remained within him in order to create this new form that we refer to as Fullbring Shikai, while his Zanpakuto has transformed and he has Fullbring markings on his body, meaning that he no longer needs to don a hollow mask in order to utilize his hollow abilities, because his Fullbring or hollow powers have merged with his shinigami powers, meaning that not only has he become a shinigami again, he is now stronger than ever before. So yet again, the Fullbring arc plays a pivotal role in explaining Ichigo's powers. If you skip over the Fullbring arc, then you're not going to understand why Ichigo no longer uses his hollow mask. You won't understand the significance of the changes of his appearance, and in addition to this, you'll be missing out on all of the pivotal growth that his character undergoes during this story arc. I really love the Fullbring arc because of the journey that Ichigo undergoes, seeing him be completely deconstructed and then rebuilt. This story arc that takes us back to the beginnings of Bleach even has us relive one of the most impactful moments within the first chapter of the manga, where Rukia gives her powers to Ichigo. Kubo masterfully echoes this moment, with Rukia being the one who returns Ichigo's powers back to him with the Reishi sword. Maybe people just didn't like the Fullbring arc because things had really calmed down. We were no longer up against Aizen, this big threat who had wanted to become a god. From these incredibly high stakes, we return to the humble beginnings of the story in Karakura Town, and in addition to this, our protagonist is nothing more than a normal teenager. While some believe that the Fullbring arc had regressed by reminding them of the substitute Shinigami arc, I believe that it grounded the entire story of Bleach in order for us to be ready for the upcoming story arc. During the Fullbring arc, we catch up with characters like Orihime, Chad and Uryu, as well as learning more about Ichigo's day-to-day life. Now while it pales in comparison to the climactic finale of Ichigo vs Aizen, I do still believe that the Fullbring arc is an important prelude to the final arc of the series, as it bridges the gap from one portion of the story to the next, taking us from Aizen all the way to Yhwach, and in that time it gives us very necessary world building through all of the examples that I had mentioned. It's a refreshing return to roots. As we take a break from the Soul Society and the Gote 13, it was a risky move, and not everybody liked it, but I for one got to appreciate a return to Karakura Town, and it wasn't even for that long, because the Gote 13 do eventually end up returning. Through the Fullbring arc, it is cemented that Ichigo is not happy unless he has the power to protect those that he cares about, and it also reveals to us how Ichigo has influenced the Soul Society in a positive way. Through him defeating Aizen, they are indebted to him, and they had even overlooked their own rules in order to help Ichigo regain his powers. Now this is something that you would never have imagined the Soul Society to do way back at the start of the story, which goes to show how much of an impact Ichigo has had. So now let's talk about the antagonist of the Fullbring arc, Ginjo Kugo. We see several sides to his character thanks to the double role that he plays. When he is trying to help Ichigo, we see a likable and charismatic side, somebody who had gained Ichigo's trust and even ours. He had wanted to help Ichigo out of selflessness, but when his true intentions are revealed, we see a more sadistic and manipulative side, proving that he is very different to Aizen or Yhwach. He doesn't want to change or alter reality in any way. He had created the group called Execution in order to give a home to those who were oppressed by others. He just simply wanted to know why the Soul Society would have lied to him, why Ukitake didn't tell him about the real purpose behind the substitute Shinigami badge. When Ginjo had learned that the Soul Society was spying on him, he had gone on a killing spree and had killed several Shinigami, as it is revealed at the end of the Fullbring arc when Ichigo attempts to get Ginjo's body back. The Fullbring arc introduces us to a fascinating and memorable villain, one who is not only designed well but is written very well. I do believe that Kubo did want to expand upon the Fullbring arc a bit more and add to the world building and characterization that he had established, but I'm sure that at the time there was a lot of fan backlash halfway through the Fullbring arc, from people who had just given up on it and wanted to see more of a grandiose story like the Arrancar arc. So in the end, we never got to see the full potential of this story arc, as no doubt Kubo was pressured by his editors to wrap up the Fullbring arc and to start the final arc of the story already. That is just me speculating and remembering the backlash at the time when the Fullbring arc was being serialized, but I do think that there's some validity to it, especially with how quickly all of the events of the Fullbring arc wrapped up. Now for people who criticize the Fullbring arc and said that Ichigo has no character development, I want to bring your attention to one point. At the start of the story, Ichigo made it apparent that he didn't like the ability to see spirits. He wanted to be rid of it so that he could have a normal life, but through living the life of a substitute shinigami and learning what it means not to just protect those who are close to you, but to accept the responsibility that comes with power in order to protect as many people as you can. After Ichigo had come to this realization, he had his powers taken away, and his initial wish at the start of the story is granted, but because of the growth that his character has undergone, he has difficulty accepting this state of powerlessness, and we see a very vulnerable side to his character, one that in my opinion is very relatable. Everybody can relate to a character that is powerless, because most people have situations in their life where they feel powerless to do anything. Whether if this is a loved one who is afflicted by a critical illness like cancer, you are powerless to do anything to save them. That's just one example from my own personal life, but I'm sure that there are many. There are moments in all of our lives where we cannot do anything to help those that are most important to us, and it is for this reason that the struggle that a character like Ichigo is going through is all that more relatable. The Fullbring arc tells a very different story to anything that we have seen within Bleach, and in my opinion it's one of the most underrated and underappreciated parts of the Bleach story, and I hope that my breakdown and analysis of the themes and the purpose of this story arc have helped you to better understand it. It's not the longest story arc, so I do advise you to check out the manga version of it if you've only been exposed to it through the anime. Now, as for where we go from here, in my next Bleach arc analysis video, we'll be beginning my breakdown of the first half of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, the final story arc of the Bleach manga. We're going to be carrying over everything that we've learnt from each one of the arc analysis videos in order to understand the truth that is revealed to us in the final arc of the series. We'll be going over the impactful introduction of the Quincy's, breaking down the character of Yhwach, as well as explaining the vital role that the Fullbringers play during the 1000-Year Blood War arc. So I can't wait to discuss the final story arc of Bleach, and I hope that you enjoyed my analysis and breakdown of the Fullbring arc. I want to know about your opinions of the Fullbring arc. Do you feel like the hate towards it is justified, or do you agree with me that the Fullbring arc is very underappreciated? I would love to read all of your thoughts, so definitely continue the discussion in the comments. And once again, thank you for making it to the end of the video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach arc analysis video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.